King Hezekiah and the Assyrian invasion, chapter 29. King Hezekiah of Judah. This is also told in 2 Kings 18:1-3. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became king of Judah, and he ruled 29 years from Jerusalem. His mother was Abijah, daughter of Zechariah. Hezekiah obeyed the Lord by doing right, just as his ancestor David had done. Temple is purified. In the first month of the first year of Hezekiah's rule, he unlocked the doors to the Lord's temple and had them repaired. Then he called the priests and Levites to the east courtyard of the temple and said, "It's time to purify the temple of the Lord God of our ancestors. You Levites must first go through the ceremony to make yourselves clean, then go into the temple and bring out everything that is unclean and unacceptable to the Lord." Some of our ancestors were unfaithful and disobeyed the Lord our God. Not only did they turn their backs on the Lord, but they also completely ignored his temple. They locked the doors, then let the lamps go out and stopped burning incense and offering sacrifices to him. The Lord became terribly angry with the people of Judah and Jerusalem, and everyone was shocked and horrified at what he did to punish them. Not only were our ancestors killed in battle, but our own children and wives were taken captive. So I have decided to renew our agreement with the Lord God of Israel. Perhaps then he will stop being so angry with us. Let's not waste any time, my friends. You are the ones who were chosen to be the Lord's priests and to offer him sacrifices. When Hezekiah finished talking, the following Levite leaders went to work: Mahas son of Amasai and Joel son of Azariah from the Kohath clan, Kish son of Abdi, and Azariah son of Jehalelel from the Merari clan, Joah son of Zimmah, and Eden son of Joah from the Gershon clan, Shimri and Jeuel from the Elizaphan clan, Zechariah and Mattaniah from the Asaph clan, Jehuel and Shimei from the Heman clan, Shemaiah and Uzziel from the Jeduthun clan. These leaders gathered together the rest of the Levites, and they all went through the ceremony to make themselves clean. Then they began to purify the temple according to the law of the Lord, just as Hezekiah had commanded. The priests went into the temple and carried out everything that was unclean. They put these things in the courtyard, and from there the Levites carried them outside the city to Kidron Valley. The priests and Levites began their work on the first day of the first month. It took them 1 week to purify the courtyards of the temple and another week to purify the temple. So on the 16th day of that same month, they went back to Hezekiah and said, "Your Majesty, we have finished our work. The entire temple is now pure again, and so is the altar and its utensils, as well as the table for the sacred loaves of bread and its utensils. And we have brought back all the things that King Ahaz took from the temple during the time he was unfaithful to God. We purified them and put them back in front of the altar, worship in the temple." Straight away, Hezekiah called together the officials of Jerusalem, and they went to the temple. They brought with them 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 goats as sacrifices to take away the sins of Hezekiah's family and of the people of Judah, as well as to purify the temple. Hezekiah told the priests, who were descendants of Aaron, to sacrifice these animals on the altar. The priests killed the bulls, the rams, and the lambs, then splattered the blood on the altar. They took the goats to Hezekiah and the worshippers, and they laid their hands on the animals. The priests then killed the goats and splattered the blood on the altar as a sacrifice to take away the sins of everyone in Israel, because Hezekiah had commanded that these sacrifices be made for all the people of Israel. Next, Hezekiah assigned the Levites to their places in the temple. He gave them cymbals, harps, and other stringed instruments, according to the instructions that the Lord had given King David and the two prophets, Gad and Nathan. The Levites were ready to play the instruments that had belonged to David. The priests were ready to blow the trumpets. As soon as Hezekiah gave the signal for the sacrifices to be burnt on the altar, the musicians began singing praises to the Lord and playing their instruments, and everyone worshipped the Lord. This continued until the last animal was sacrificed. After that, Hezekiah and the crowd of worshippers knelt down and worshipped the Lord. Then Hezekiah and his officials ordered the Levites to sing the songs of praise that David and Asaph the prophet had written, and so they bowed down and joyfully sang praises to the Lord. Hezekiah said to the crowd, "Now that you are once again acceptable to the Lord, bring sacrifices and offerings to give him thanks." The people did this, and some of them voluntarily brought animals to be offered as sacrifices. 70 bulls, 100 rams, and 200 lambs were brought as sacrifices to please the Lord. 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep were brought as sacrifices to ask the Lord's blessing. There were not enough priests to skin all these animals, because many of the priests had not taken the time to go through the ceremony to make themselves clean. However, since all the Levites had made themselves clean, they helped the priests until the last animal was skinned. Besides all the sacrifices that were burnt on the altar, the fat from the other animal sacrifices was burnt, and the offerings of wine were poured over the altar. So the temple was once again used for worshiping the Lord. Hezekiah and the people of Judah celebrated because God had helped them make this happen so quickly. Chapter 30. Hezekiah prepares to celebrate Passover. Passover wasn't celebrated in the first month, which was the usual time, because many of the priests were still unclean and unacceptable to serve, and because not everyone in Judah had come to Jerusalem for the festival. So Hezekiah, his officials, and the people agreed to celebrate Passover in the second month. Hezekiah sent a message to everyone in Israel and Judah, including those in the territories of Ephraim and West Manasseh, inviting them to the temple in Jerusalem for the celebration of Passover in honor of the Lord God of Israel. Everyone from Beersheba in the south to Dan in the north was invited. This was the largest crowd of people that had ever celebrated Passover according to the official records. Hezekiah's messengers went to everywhere in Israel and Judah with the following letter. People of Israel, now that you have survived the invasion of the Assyrian kings, it's time for you to turn back to the Lord God our ancestors Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob worshipped. If you do this, he will stop being angry. Don't follow the example of your ancestors and your Israelite relatives in the north. They were unfaithful to the Lord, and he punished them horribly. Don't be stubborn like your ancestors. Decide now to obey the Lord our God. Come to Jerusalem and worship him in the temple that will belong to him forever. Then he will stop being angry, and the enemies who have captured your families will show pity and send them back home. The Lord God is kind and merciful, and if you turn back to him, he will no longer turn his back on you. The messengers went to every town in Ephraim and West Manasseh as far north as the territory of Zebulun, but everyone left and insulted them. Only a few people from the tribes of Asher, West Manasseh, and Zebulun were humble and went to Jerusalem. God also made everyone in Judah eager to do what Hezekiah and his officials had commanded. Passover is celebrated. In the second month, a large crowd of people gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate the festival of thin bread. They took all the foreign altars and incense altars in Jerusalem and threw them into Kidron Valley. Then on the 14th day of that same month, the Levites began killing the lambs for Passover, because many of the worshippers were unclean and were not allowed to kill their own lambs. Meanwhile, some of the priests and Levites felt ashamed because they had not gone through the ceremony to make themselves clean. They immediately went through that ceremony and went to the temple where they offered sacrifices to please the Lord. Then the priests and Levites took their positions, according to the law of Moses, the servant of God. As the Levites killed the lambs, they handed some of the blood to the priests, who splattered it on the altar. Most of the people who came from Ephraim, West Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun had not made themselves clean, but they ignored God's law and ate the Passover lambs anyway. Hezekiah found out what they had done and prayed, "The Lord God, these people are unclean according to the laws of holiness, but they are worshipping you just as their ancestors did. So please be kind and forgive them." The Lord answered Hezekiah's prayer and did not punish them. The worshippers in Jerusalem were very happy and celebrated the festival for 7 days. The Levites and priests sang praises to the Lord every day and played their instruments. Hezekiah thanked the Levites for doing such a good job leading the celebration. The worshippers celebrated for 7 days by offering sacrifices, by eating the sacred meals, and by praising the Lord God of their ancestors. Everyone was so excited that they agreed to celebrate 7 more days. So Hezekiah gave the people 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep to be offered as sacrifices and to be used as food for the sacred meals. His officials gave 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep, and many more priests agreed to go through the ceremony to make themselves clean. Everyone was very happy, including those from Judah and Israel, the priests and Levites, and the foreigners living in Judah and Israel. It was the biggest celebration in Jerusalem since the days of King Solomon, the son of David. The priests and Levites asked God to bless the people, and from his home in heaven he did. Chapter 31. The people destroyed the local shrines. This is also told in 2 Kings of 18:4. After the festival, the people went to every town in Judah and smashed the stone images of foreign gods and cut down the sacred poles for worshipping the goddess Asherah. They destroyed all the local shrines and foreign altars in Judah, as well as those in the territories of Benjamin, Ephraim, and West Manasseh. Then everyone went home. Offerings for the priests and Levites. Hezekiah divided the priests and Levites into groups according to their duties. Then he assigned them the responsibilities of offering sacrifices to please the Lord and sacrifices to ask his blessing. He also appointed people to serve at the temple and to sing praises at the temple gates. Hezekiah provided animals from his own herds and flocks to use for the morning and evening sacrifices, as well as for the sacrifices during the Sabbath celebrations, the new moon festivals, and the other religious feasts required by the law of the Lord. He told the people of Jerusalem to bring the offerings that were to be given to the priests and Levites, so that they would have time to serve the Lord with their work. As soon as the people heard what the king wanted, they brought a tenth of everything they owned, including their best grain, wine, olive oil, honey, and other crops. The people from the other towns of Judah brought a tenth of their herds and flocks, as well as a tenth of anything they had dedicated to the Lord. The people started bringing their offerings to Jerusalem in the 3rd month, and the last ones arrived 4 months later. When Hezekiah and his officials saw these offerings, they thanked the Lord and the people. Hezekiah asked the priests and Levites about the large amount of offerings. The high priest at the time was Azariah, a descendant of Zadok, and he replied, "Ever since the people have been bringing us their offerings, we have had more than enough food and supplies. The Lord has certainly blessed his people. Look at how much is left over." So the king gave orders for storerooms to be built in the temple, and when they were completed, all the extra offerings were taken there. Hezekiah and Azariah then appointed Conaniah the Levite to be in charge of these storerooms. His brother Shimei was his assistant, and the following Levites worked with them: Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Asahel, Jerimoth, Jozabad, Eliel, Ismachiah, Mahat, and Benaiah. Kor, son of Imnah, was assigned to guard the east gate, and he was put in charge of receiving the offerings voluntarily given to God and of dividing them among the priests and Levites. He had 6 assistants who were responsible for seeing to it that all the priests in the other towns of Judah also got their share of these offerings. They were Eden, Minni, Amin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, and Shechaniah. Every priest and every Levite over 30 years old who worked daily in the temple received part of these offerings according to their duties. The priests were listed in the official records by clans, and the Levites 20 years old and older were listed by their duties. The official records also included their wives and children, because they had also been faithful in keeping themselves clean and acceptable to serve the Lord. Hezekiah also appointed other men to take food and supplies to the priests and Levites whose homes were in the pasture land around the towns of Judah. But the priests had to be descendants of Aaron, and the Levites had to be listed in the official records. Everything Hezekiah did while he was king of Judah, including what he did for the temple in Jerusalem, was right and good. He was a successful king because he obeyed the Lord God with all his heart. Chapter 32. King Sennacherib of Assyria invaded Judah. This is also told in 2 Kings 18:13-37, Isaiah 36:1-22. After King Hezekiah had faithfully obeyed the Lord's instructions by doing these things, King Sennacherib of Assyria invaded Judah. He attacked the fortified cities and thought he would capture every one of them. As soon as Hezekiah learned that Sennacherib was planning to attack Jerusalem, he and his officials worked out a plan to cut off the supply of water outside the city, so that the Assyrians would have no water when they came to attack. The officials got together a large workforce that stopped up the springs and streams near Jerusalem. Hezekiah's workers also repaired the broken sections of the city wall. Then they built defense towers and an outer wall to help protect the one already there. The landfill on the east side of David's city was also strengthened. He gave orders to make a large supply of weapons and shields, and he appointed army commanders over the troops. Then he gathered the troops together in the open area in front of the city gate and said to them, "Be brave and confident. There is no reason to be afraid of King Sennacherib and his powerful army. We are much more powerful because the Lord our God fights on our side. The Assyrians must rely on human power alone." These words encouraged the army of Judah. When Sennacherib and his troops were camped at the town of Lachish, he sent a message to Hezekiah and the people in Jerusalem. He said, "I am King Sennacherib of Assyria, and I have Jerusalem surrounded. Do you think you can survive my attack? Hezekiah, your king, is telling you that the Lord your God will save you from me. But he is lying, and you will die of hunger and thirst. Didn't Hezekiah tear down all except one of the Lord's altars and places for worship? And didn't he tell you, people of Jerusalem and Judah, to worship at that one place? You've heard what my ancestors and I have done to other nations. Were the gods of those nations able to defend their land against us? None of those gods kept their people safe from the king of Assyria. Do you really think your God can do any better? Don't be fooled by Hezekiah. No god of any nation has ever been able to stand up to Assyria. Believe me, your God cannot keep you safe." The Assyrian officials said terrible things about the Lord God and his servant Hezekiah. Sennacherib's letter even made fun of the Lord. It said, "The gods of other nations could not save their people from Assyria's army, and neither will the God Hezekiah worships." The officials said all these things in Hebrew so that everyone listening from the city wall would understand and be terrified and surrender. The officials talked about the Lord God as if he were nothing but an ordinary god or an idol that someone had made. The death of King Sennacherib. This is also told in 2 Kings 19:14 to 19, 35 to 37, Isaiah 37:14 to 20, 37, 36 to 38. Hezekiah and the prophet Isaiah, son of Amos, asked the Lord for help, and he sent an angel who killed every soldier and commander in the Assyrian camp. Sennacherib returned to Assyria completely disgraced. Then one day he went into the temple of his God, where some of his sons killed him. The Lord rescued Hezekiah and the people of Jerusalem from Sennacherib and also protected them from other enemies. People brought offerings to Jerusalem for the Lord and expensive gifts for Hezekiah. And from that day on, every nation on earth respected Hezekiah. Hezekiah gets sick and almost dies. This is also told in 2 Kings 21 to 11, Isaiah 8, 1 to 8. About this same time, Hezekiah got sick and was almost dead. He prayed, and the Lord gave him a sign that he would recover. But Hezekiah was so proud that he refused to thank the Lord for everything he had done for him. This made the Lord angry, and he punished Hezekiah and the people of Judah and Jerusalem. Hezekiah and the people later felt sorry and asked the Lord for forgive them. So the Lord did not punish them as long as Hezekiah was king. Hezekiah's words. This is also told in 2 Kings 20:12 to 19, Isaiah 9:39, 1 to 8. Hezekiah was very rich and everyone respected him. He built special rooms to store the silver, the gold, the precious stones and spices, the shares, and the other valuable possessions. Storehouses were also built for his supply of grain, wine, and olive oil. Barns were built for his cattle, and pens were put up for his sheep. God made Hezekiah extremely rich, so he bought even more sheep, goats, and cattle, and he built towns where he could keep all these animals. It was Hezekiah who built a tunnel that carried the water from Gihon spring into the city of Jerusalem. In fact, everything he did was successful. Even when the leaders of Babylonia sent messengers to ask Hezekiah about the sign God had given him, God let Hezekiah give his own answer to test him and to see if he would remain faithful. Hezekiah dies. This is also told in 2 Kings 20:21. Everything else Hezekiah did while he was king, including how faithful he was to the Lord, is included in the records kept by Isaiah the prophet. These are written in the history of the kings of Judah and Israel. When Hezekiah died, he was buried in the section of the loyal tombs that was reserved for the most respected kings, and everyone in Judah and Jerusalem honored him. His son Manasseh then became king.